So hello and welcome everybody to today's Interagency Task Force Foundation Forum call on crime prevention in Arab society in Israel. As we have all heard over recent years, rising crime rates in Arab communities and gun violence especially have been at crisis levels for quite a while now, and recognized as a top priority affecting basic security and quality of life, not to mention horizons for social and economic development in Arab communities. While the root causes of this crisis can be traced to many sources, the discussion about this issue and how to address it has often hinged on whether and to what extent it is an issue that needs to be first and foremost addressed as a policing and law enforcement concern, and whether the challenges in the relationships between law enforcement agencies and Arab citizens of Israel can be overcome. Today, we have an opportunity to hear from government, civil society, and academic leaders on developments of new approaches to the issue that aim to deepen collaboration and align diverse agencies and stakeholders around the mutual goal of reducing the violence. Joining us today are Professor Badi Khseisi, and excuse my pronunciation, Director of the Can whoever has joined mute themselves? Thank you. Professor Badi Khseisi, Director of the Institute of Criminology, Faculty of Law, Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Advocate Erez Padan, Deputy Director, Jerusalem District Attorney, Ministry of Justice. And Dr. Daniela Benish, Area Head at JDC Ashalim, which is a coordinating entity for a pilot initiative that they're working, or an initiative that they're working on. We'll have about 1 hour of presentation and Q&A with our speakers, after which we'll have additional time held over for group discussion as needed. And I'll hand it first. Professor Badi Khseisi will present, give us a little background on the issue, and then hand it over to Advocate Erez Padan, who will describe the collaborative action approach that is being developed right now. And Dr. Daniela Benish will jump in to connect the dots. So with no further ado, Professor Badi Khseisi, please dive in. I will share the screen.
Thank you, Liron. Thank you very much. I'm glad to participate in this distinguished forum today. My name is Professor Badi Khseisi. I'm the director of the Institute of Criminology. Originally, I come from a Druze village on the Carmel Mountain near Haifa, where I had completed my dissertation. And later on, I studied on SUNY Albany at the School of Criminal Justice. In this project, I lead the academic part that deal with the development of the project and the evaluation, both the process and the outcome evaluation. So the topic of violence in the Arab society, we can to some extent say that it's a new topic. If we go back and check the political agenda of some of the main political parties, Arab parties in Israel, you would see like a decade ago, this issue was absent. There wasn't any addressing, and mainly just in the small articles, but the main articles were the national, the political, the social, all kind that dealt with issues of land and religion and nationalism and issues like that. But crime wasn't the big issue. In the last decade, we see that crime become one of the main issues that the Arab community suffer from. I will, if you can move to the next slide, or just to give you the, just to get a sense what we are talking about. You can see that when we check the numbers on homicide and on violent crimes and the use of firearms, that the Arab society is overrepresented by any measure. And we can see that just in the last few years, the homicide cases doubled just in a 5 years period. Israel, more generally, is a country with low homicide rate. We are very similar to the European countries. But when you split between the Jews and the Arab, you see the huge gap of homicide, especially in homicide, but not just homicide. Homicide is like the ice. When you see just the edge, but when we see the frequency of violent crimes and the victims, that people that were were shooted and were stabbed, but they didn't die. The numbers are bigger, and the harm to the families are devastated, and not just to the family, but the whole community, because this makes those community unsafe or perceived as unsafe. And I would just elaborate. Here we can see the numbers that Israeli Arab are about 20%, but they are overrepresented in the homicide cases when it's go above 100 in the last couple of years, when the Jewish population are less than a third from that number. And if we calculate the probabilities, your probability to be killed as an Arab is more than 10 times when compared to Jews. Now, if we try to understand, I'm sorry about that, guys. If we try to understand what are the sources of such of this violence, we can track a couple of mechanisms or deep-seated problem that increase the use of violence. One is that the Arab society is characterized as a society with a weak state, weak governability, and this affects the use of violence, because then you have a lot of patterns of vigilantism, that people resort to violence in order to resolve conflict. And that's the reason why in the last couple of years, they buy a lot of firearms. And that happened when all those traditional informal social control become weak and not effective. So that was a big problem that is the source, one of the sources of the violence. The other source is that because of the weak governability and the lack of low norms of the law, there was development of a culture of illegalism, like perceiving the law as something negative, something some discriminatory mechanism, and therefore it's not easy to advocate for law enforcement and to ask people to testify against criminal and other related issue, and this really create a big problem when it's come to violence in the Arab society, when it's come to the weak state, the illegalism, the culture of legalism. And the last thing is that if we try to understand what are the patterns or the sociology of violence in the Arab society, we will find that it reflects the social structure of this community. And in order to make it clear, we see that a lot of the violence is reflect the extended family disputes sometimes, and then you understand how a very trivial conflict between two students at school in the morning turned to be huge violent encounter later on in the evening between two families, or two extended families, with casualties, of course, and sometimes death. So this gives us a sense about the problem, the numbers, and the mechanism or the sources that we can, of course, discuss later if you want. Can we move to the next? Oh, another thing that should be not just, I say, not just homicide and violence, but also the use of firearms become a huge issue in the Arab society. If you track the statistic in the Israeli police about the use of firearms, most of the firearm events are in the Arab society, above 90%. And it's the police estimate that there are tens of thousands of firearms in the Arab communities need to be collected. Tell you something about how widespread this is, and how dangerous is to live in those communities. And in more social, we need to consider the ramification of the social fabric in the Arab society and communities, and what damage it creates, especially to middle class Arab citizens that are frustrated from this situation, and they are looking to leave their community, moving to neighboring Jewish community, and that in its sense create another tension that also consequences of these things. So there's a chain of reactions, not just merely the violent event, but rather much more wider consequences. Can we move to the other slides, please, Leron? Okay, so now we know what is the problem. We now try to build the solution, and this solution is have a couple of principles. First, it's a collaborative solution. I just want to tell you something. I've been in this area for about 2 decades. This is one of the most ambitious and innovative initiative that I witnessed in Israeli law enforcement agency, and this is I have to give to my partner from the agency, first Erez Padan, my partners in the police and the Ministry of Public Security and other partners as well. This is really pioneering, having all those partners. So our point of departure is similar to medical perspective. If you want to deal with some chronic and serious problem, you need to address it with a massive intervention that actually make a change. You cannot just give one segment of intervention, but rather it should be massive, should be synchronized in order to make a change. The rationale model behind the intervention focus on a triangle with 3 edges. The one is enforcement, the other is treatment and prevention, and the third one is the community. So our perspective, and we capitalize on the best practice and best evidence available in order to create this triangle. So first, the enforcement. In order to deal with this problem, you need to have a big stick that create deterrence or fear of apprehension among high-risk criminals. And this, we have a very sophisticated model that my partner Erez will elaborate more later on. In the next edge, we have the treatment and the prevention. That would differ maybe from other narrow enforcement model. We also recognize the opportunity when you have contact with criminals to try to rehabilitate, to give them a vision, or give them a possibility to re-enter society in a normative way, and also to work also on the prevention of crime, not just reacting to violent crime. The third edge is the community. We capitalize on the community as, of course, as a main partner. Second, on resources that the community could give in order to create much robust response, both in the enforcement level and, of course, on the rehabilitation and treatment. So the principle that we use, first, it has to be focused. We cannot fix all the problem of the Arab society. We focus on the criminal, the high-risk criminal. We focus on hotspot that Erez will speak later on. Our point of departure that we work on the unit level of the community. And this differs because in Israel, I guess, and also in other states, usually we work in this district and area, but here we brought all the agencies to think community-based, not areas, but on the community. And this is something that it's very valuable. We use data in order to design our intervention. And it's based on the best, as I say, the best practice, evidence-based intervention, mostly being evaluated in the US. And we do that, as I said, with a full collaborative manner with all the agencies that I mentioned. We also do that not in a way that it's come with harsh enforcement, but rather with a dialogue and with a fairness and procedural justice with the community, that it's clear that everyone should be on board and everything and things should be transparent as for the motivation behind this intervention. And of course, as an academic and also most of the policymakers here are engaged in this idea that in order to do something and to be able to generalize this policy, we need ongoing monitoring of the project and later on an evaluation that tell us if this thing worked, not just in theory, but in practice. Next slide, please.
Wait, hold on a second. I want to jump in because I think we need to take this is the first call that the task force is doing on crime and violence prevention in Arab society for a reason, because it's been such a difficult issue to understand what kind of models can be, how are models situated, and exactly what you're saying. I want to slow down because you shared so much. Are there models out there that connect between this whole concept of law enforcement and the community? And we're not, even before we get into the fact that you, the three of you, are engaged in a pilot that's about to move forward, I think we should take a moment to hear about the genesis of this idea and a little bit about the background and the kind of research. I believe, Erez, you were going to share your thinking, your orientation to this issue, and what led you to identify collaborative action as a model that may be effective. Do you think we can have you share that a little bit at this moment?
Liron, took it to me or
no, I think at this point we had discussed having the opening about the violent crime, and then before we jump in to further discuss what this actual model and the initiative, the pilot is, I would like I want to invite Erez to talk about the genesis and the how this model even came to being identified as an approach that may work in this issue. Yeah. Thank you, Vadi.
Sure.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, or good morning. So I'm the Deputy Director of the Jerusalem DA. That means I'm a prosecutor, and I'm managing a bunch of prosecutors. In this project and this evening, I'm representing actually not only the District Attorney of Jerusalem, but actually state prosecution. And for us, it's a very unique program and very unique opportunity. As you can imagine, the work of a prosecutor, our regular line of work consists on law enforcement. We indict people. We work as hard as we can in order to convict the guilty and put them behind bars. We are usually putting a lot of energy and effort into that line of work. We initiated this program recognizing that the law enforcement tools we're using today are not enough. They are very important. They should be better, but law enforcement for itself is not good enough. And I think what Liron referred to was a project we started out in East Jerusalem, trying to use the collaborative effort approach in order to confront youth violence in quite tough neighborhoods, recognizing that it actually showed very good results. And the idea is that coming and meeting the challenge of the severe violence in the Arab society, try to bring this collaborative approach to confront this kind of, I think you can call it a violence epidemic, not less than an epidemic, and try to use different approaches that are not only consisting on law enforcement. We understand, I think today, and this comes from the research and from the what works literature in criminal justice, that we have to use more sophisticated tools. And this collaboration recognizes, as Professor Saisi mentioned, that we have to use enforcement combined with prevention, with treatment, and with community efforts. And only this kind of approach that actually creates a synergy between the three elements can really change or confront the great challenge of the severe violence in the Arab society. And I have to say one more thing, then we're presenting here a program, I think, which is very unique and putting forward a unique collaboration, but it's totally obvious that there is not one solution. There's not like this magic formula that we're suggesting that we'll just use this formula and everything will be solved. It's trying to put out there another kind of tool, another kind of model, which we think is smart and we think is evidence-based. And we think it has the chances of showing good results. But a lot more things are being done and should be done out there. I mean, education, long-term investments in employment and in education, and economic enforcement, reinforcing these villages and this society, many things. But we are focusing on developing a model that is confronting directly the severe violence and trying to reduce the number of incidents where people are getting shot. And this is the focus of this model, and this is what we're trying to add to the toolbox of the agencies working together on this project.
Can I also just jump in and say, because we didn't mention it, at the risk of spending a lot of time on this, which is not today's focus, that the government did recently pass a 2.4 billion shekel plan to prevent violent crime, which is now in part supporting the initiative you're going to talk about. And I think that one of the reasons that we were so excited in meeting you is the potential that the model you're talking about has to inform the thinking and the type of approach for what it means for government policy to address, for initiatives to address crime prevention. So that's just to put in the context that there's a GR 549, that this is part of this, and that you're in, and I think I pushed to the next slide to talk about how you're influencing agencies and actors on the local and the national level. Would you, excuse me if I derailed your thoughts, but I thought that was an important note. I'd like to pass it back to you.
Sure. So I think this is still Buddy's push on this slide.
Okay, I think this is the last one. Then Erez, it's your job, man. Okay. Okay, so it was about 2 years ago that we had a hackathon at the Hebrew University. And that hackathon, we identified 7 communities that were characterized by high homicide rate and violent crime, serious violent crimes. And at that hackathon, we invited a couple of agencies, first the Ministry of Justice and the police, and other partners, and of course the community themselves, the head of the community, the mayors, and or other representatives from the community and civil society. And we have this hackathon, try to figure out what is the best practice. And from that hackathon later on, we went forward, and as Liron mentioned, now it's a program that going beyond the hackathon and involve a lot of agencies in Israel, mainly the communities, of course, and the police, the prosecution, and the police. There's also a special branch that deal with the crime prevention in the Arab society, and there are also a lot of the Ministry of Public Security, and there are also other partners that in the steering committee that shows how the commitment of the state to this project, starting from the Prime Minister office and other agencies, as you can see. So that tell you the nature of the project at both at the national level and at the local level, when we have the most important representative and actors so that this initiative would work. We could have more partners at the local level, but we looked for the parsimonic or the best number that we needed in order to make this work, because too many members and too many partners could create problem to move forward. So we identify these partners. You can see from the partners what I described previous and what the Erez was elaborating. We have the enforcement agencies, the treatment agencies, the community agencies, all of them here nested. And what is nice about it, it's not just everyone doing one segment of his role, but also helping the other doing their work in the other field. So this is how this project is being modeled, and those are the main partners, both at the national and the local level. The next slide would be the map, I think, Laurent, or just to give a sense to the, yes. So this is the map. As you can see, those are the 7 communities that we spoke about, starting from the north. Turan, I think it's the one in the up in the north, going through Tamra, Jisr al-Zarqa, Al-Fahim, Lod as a mixed city, Taibe, and Rahat. So as you can see, we covered just from the top, from north to south, giving some representation to different areas, especially the mixed city, of course. So we are giving here some representative sample of the Arab communities in Israel. I think, Erez, now it's for you.
Thank you, Badi.
Guys, am I on the right slide?
Yeah, this is the right slide. Because this is a Zoom and because we are on screen share, I can't really see the faces of the participants, but you're probably asking by now, okay, but Tachles, as we say in Hebrew, Tachles, what is this about? What is this program about? So it's hard to do justice to this model in such a short pitch, but I will try to demonstrate the main elements of what we're trying to do in a couple of minutes. And so as Badi mentioned, the principles, and then the 7 villages that were chosen for this project, they were chosen by the police as being like at the top of the league of the severe violence incidents in Israel. So each one of these 7 towns is suffering from a very high rate of severe violence. And the idea, as mentioned before, is to combine a collaborative action force team in every village that consists of the mayor and his people, the police, the prosecution, the social services, etc. And what we see here is actually the process, the work process. So the work process consists of the 4 major blocks here in front of you. The first is doing a diagnosis. If you come into one of these villages and you want to talk to the mayor and ask him what's the story of the severe violence in your town, you will probably hear story A. You will ask the police department, they will tell you story B, and the prosecutor probably story C. This is from the field. This is the stories we hear, different stories about what's going on here. And the idea in the first stage is to do a diagnosis that is based on data and is kind of objective and not based on a narrative, and to agree about defining the problem. What is the problem of severe violence in your town? And they differ highly from place to place. I mean, Badi mentioned Turan, the violence there is initiated by a very hard dispute between 2 very large families over the elections a few years back. It's very different from the violence in Jisr al-Zarqa, which is young people that are between ages 20 and 25 that are organized in groups or in clans that are fighting each other's in kind of gang violence. So both are severe violence in Arab society, but it's very different once you want to sort out and try to think of solutions. So the idea of the first stage is actually to do a very deep and thorough diagnosis of the severe violence in the village. that is agreed upon, maybe not 100%, but at least 70–80% agreed about among the partnership what is going on here. The second stage, after having this map or having this diagnosis, is thinking about how should the intervention look like. And of course, it has to be, as Badi mentioned, based on evidence or what works, what we know are the best strategies to confront these kinds of problems, and create a theory of change which is holistic and speaks to the enforcement, but also to the treatment and prevention, and also speaks to community work, and combining these efforts together to create a synergy that will create the greatest impact in reducing the violence. The third stage is actually implementation, hardest part from my experience. You can have a wonderful program and wonderful idea and a perfect diagnosis, but implementation is hard and it's messy. And everyone here on this talk obviously knows that. So this is the implementation stage, and stage number 4, which was actually mentioned by Badi earlier, will run through all through those 3 stages, is actually doing kind of monitoring and evaluation of the program and giving us feedback on whether or not we succeeded in reducing the violence, and if yes, why, and what elements created the value, and if not, why did it happen? And the idea is to use these 7 villages as kind of a startup or kind of a pilot for the other 78 villages in the Arab society in Israel. So this is kind of a development, kind of a greenhouse for developing a model that we expect to succeed in a way that can be brought to other villages as well. Next slide, please. So about how the intervention looks like, I would like to talk about or demonstrate at least 2 or 3 of the strategies we are planning to use, or we recommend the villages to use in going into this collaborative action. And the first one is called focused deterrence. And it's based on the idea that violence is very highly concentrated among a very small number of people. They talk about, criminologists talk about the rule of 5 to 50, and they mean less than 5% of the criminals, not of the general population, less than 5% of the criminals are responsible for about 50% of the incidents. So this is a very high number. And just to give you another example, the NYPD analysis of 2020 gun violence in New York City revealed that only 100 people are connected to 3 or more gunfires, either as perpetrators or witnesses or victims. So the number of people who are recidivist and were responsible for creating a large amount of violence is a very, very small number. And the idea of the strategy is first to identify this group and to single them out from the general population and out of actually the criminal population. So then we get to this high risk, this list of high risk offenders. And the idea is to work with these offenders with 2 leverages. One is, of course, the enforcement leverage. The meaning, if I catch him or if I have evidence that I can issue an indictment and send him to jail, then of course I will use the enforcement. But it's not always the case that I can have an indictment against someone. So the idea is, at the same time, I will also try to offer him or to try to see, can I do something to take him out of this group of high-risk offenders? Maybe I can offer him employment, treatment, some kind of rehabilitation program that will take him out. And the idea is this, the messaging from the 2 combined messaging, first from the law enforcement saying, we know who you are, we know what you're doing, and we're looking out for you, and if we'll catch you, we'll hit you hard. And at the same time, giving him a hand and giving him a chance to change from the bad place where he is right now and try to make him take a different path or a different way of life, getting him away from the violence. So this is the focused deterrence strategy. It was actually implemented very successfully in a few cities in the US, starting in Boston ceasefire operation in the 90s, reducing gun violence in 40 or 50% even in some neighborhoods. So this is a very effective strategy, and we are planning to implement this strategy. Another example is the hotspots strategy. Can you please go on? So like I said, the criminal activity and violence is very highly concentrated in a number of people. It's also very highly concentrated in a very small number of places. It's not, so if you come to a village like Jisr al-Zarqa, or a city like al-Fahim, it's not that the violence is spread everywhere equally. So there's an equal chance that violent incidents will happen anywhere. No, there are, it's very highly concentrated in very specific places. Of course, it's all statistically, yeah, but statistically in a place where we were just visiting in Rahat last week, there were in 2021, 700 incidents of firearms in 2021. It's crazy, hundreds of incidents. They don't spread equally in all of Rahat. They are focused on, or they're concentrated in very specific places. And the idea is to capitalize on this fact and to concentrate our efforts on these places. And it's not only law enforcement concentration, like bringing a policeman to stand or to patrol this specific area. It's also putting up lights and gardening and changing the physical condition of this hotspot can totally change what's going on there and reduce the number of incidents going on these hotspots. And actually, it's not, the research has proven that it's not that if the violence is reduced on one spot, it easily moves around the corner to another spot. No, if you treat the hotspot, it reduces objectively, it reduces the violence. So this is the concept. And the idea is also, there's also law enforcement work here, and there's also community work here and municipal work here on these hotspots. Another example for the strategies we're using that combine enforcement, community work, and prevention is the idea of the community intervention teams or lifeguards. Many of these incidents are kind of spontaneous. They can start from a very small dispute on a parking place, or on just on someone saying something that's another person sees as offensive, and this ignites a conflict that ends up in these people shooting at each other. And the idea is to have teams and actually people that are trained to identify these dangerous incidents before they ignite and turn into a violent incident, and actually come in and try to act as lifeguards and save and take people away from the dangerous conflict, and try to spill cold water and reduce the chances of this conflict escalating into violence. And these teams belong to the community. They're trained by the community. They're not reporting to the police. Of course, if the violent incident has already happened, then the police will be in. But the idea here is to use people that are trusted from within the community to actually recognize and identify these situations and try to intervene before they deteriorate to violence. So this is like another example of the strategies we're talking about. Yes, Nancy, exactly. The interrupters in the US, exactly. So this is a list of the 5 major strategies we're recommending. We're recommending focused deterrence, hotspots, also on the policing, but not only, also in the community work of hotspots, intervention teams and lifeguards. We also see a very high importance in having facilitated community roundtables many of the long-term effect should be, will be the community changing the values and changing the habits and changing the culture of violence in their community. And it's only through their work that this change can happen. And we think there's a very important, there's high importance for having this structured discussions. And they also have to do with trust and legitimacy toward law enforcement. Many of these incidents, we are not able to collect enough evidence. And the reason we are not able to connect enough evidence to indict people is because there's no trust in the police, and people won't come and testify, and people will hide their cameras, and people will even destroy evidence because they don't trust the police. And so there's this cycle of there's no trust, so there's no indictment. There's no indictment, so people act on their own in self-defense or just doing it on their own, taking the law into their hands. And so part of this facilitated community talks is also about building trust with law enforcement. The last strategy is the idea of hospital-based violence intervention practices. I'll just say like 2 sentences about it. The idea is after someone is hurt, he comes to the hospital, and this is kind of a crossroads for him. Out of the hospital, he will either go back and try to revenge and shoot back at whoever shot him, or he can come to the conclusion that he almost died in this incident, and he might he should take a different route or a different path in his life. And the idea is to use this low point as a point of intervention and then starting some work with him, treatment actually, that will take him to the right choice of getting away from violence and getting away from revenge. So this is just like really a very short outline of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We had a generally lively set of questions come up on chat, and I want to be able to get to them. Some of them were already responded, and I'll review those. But before we go into it, Daniela, can I ask you to come in and say a few framing words, and then we'll integrate that in the Q&A.
Sure. Thank you, Liron, and good evening, everyone. I'm Daniela. I work as the area head in Ashalim at the JDC, which probably many of you know. And I would like here to say a few words that maybe, as Liron said at the beginning, will connect the dots and also will bring us to the Q&A session. Thinking about implementation and thinking about the collaboration between different agencies here. So first of all, maybe Liron, you also asked Erez before, how did he come up with the idea of working in a collaboration between those 3 areas of enforcement, treatment, and community work? And I would like to add to his comments also another view on that. Those problems and challenges that we're looking at are not problems and challenges within only the realm of behavior and police. The root causes of the problems and the situation, as Professor Seisi also described at the beginning, are social problems, economic problems, trust, issues of trust, issues between the government and local communities. And if you look broadly at the problem-solving approach to that, you can't offer one narrow solution or one narrow perspective to such complicated social problem eventually. So you have to, the problem is complicated, the solutions should come from all those 3 perspectives together. That's kind of the paradigm that we're looking at here. That's also something that, as Erez described before, was tried in a different place in East Jerusalem and in other places. We at the JDC have some experience at this field in different projects. And this is why we believe that would be a good approach, at least worth trying to look at this problem. So that's one thing to say. And here our job here, in a way, the way that Ashalim works with the government is also to look at the partnership between different agencies in the government. And that's a huge challenge here because we can't promise one thing and not create how they say that, and without creating a base or a model for solutions. So the work, and as Buddy before said, the work together of police with prosecution, but also with municipalities and also with the Ministry of Welfare and also with other sources within the government is very unique, but is also very challenging. So if we see that as a solution, we are here in a way to help implementation, help creating those interagencies partnerships, if you'd like, which are also a challenge to implement, and help here, and it was mentioned before, to create practices and best practices within that model that we would be able to scale and scale up and offer to other cities and villages in a way that would be sustainable and systematic, I would say, to use. So we really look at that as a pilot project, that the parts that would be successful would be implemented, and the government promised to really look at that. And I think, and you mentioned the governmental decision before, part of why the government supports this pilot within the bigger decision is because it's promising in a way of creating new solutions that would be implemented through the program while we're still working with the same, of course, evaluation in other villages and countries. So that's kind of how I would close that session, and hopefully that answers some of the questions already, and we can go on.
Some of them, I think there's interest. Sorry, is that my noise in the background? I think there's interest on two levels. One, we have questions about understanding the total budget for the program and what the government does actually fund. I think there's questions about, so what stage the pilot is already in, because as I think you said, and as Erez said, and as Buddy said, there's planning, there's the model, and then there's the how much weight is put for its success on the local actors to come together. So who, if we can get a little bit more specific about who the local actors are in a municipality, do you already have an example of a community of actors that are identified and trained, or is this still in the future stages? What is needed in order to make that part work from now until the pilot starts? That's one side of the questions that's going deeper into this exact pilot. And then there's questions about the issues that that affect it, and what kind of crime it targets. Does this model address domestic violence? Some of them were answered on chat, but I think they're worth repeating. Does the model address domestic violence or violence against women? Are there, does it look at including rehabilitated offenders into the future program planning? And maybe a little bit of discussion about why there is such a proliferation of guns and small arms in Arab communities. So I just put 6 questions on the table. Let's start with the status of the project, the budget, and if the actors, and I will keep track of the questions as we go. Who wants to jump in and talk about the status of the project? Daniela, do you want to pick that up? Erez, Buddy?
Sure. You want to speak? Yeah, Daniela want to. Oh, okay. So you want to speak about who are our partners at the local government?
No, the status meaning what's the total budget of the program? What's the part of the government budgeting?
So it's better speak to Daniela about that.
Mm-hmm. So the total budget at the moment that the government put on that as a direct budget is 25 million shekels at the moment, but we're also building at
for how many years?
For the next 5 years, while most of it, or for the next 5 years, let's say. However, we know that we will, you start slow because some of the interventions will take place, will take time to put in. However, we want to start immediately, and I'll say something about the status of the groups already in the field also, but it's 25 million shekels. And there are additional governmental funds in many of the aspects that we're talking about, or many of the fields that we're talking about. We're talking about a young man who has no professional background, for example. So part of the idea is that the direct money will be here to start something, but then we can connect that person to the right agency or place that would help him with professional work or with any kind of class that he needs as an alternative. We're looking at the alternatives as Erez said. So we're also hoping to find a way to use some of the budget that the government allocates to the problems and the social problems in the Arab society, which are also aimed at solving some of the violence issues, because again, it's all connected. But that's kind of the difference between the direct budget and the broader overview of budgets that the government actually does allocate to the Arab society. In the last few months, we saw 2 different decisions on that. So that's one thing. One other thing to say about the groups, we're already in the field. We're in a hurry. We know we can't wait. It's a very urgent issue, and we know that we need to work intensively and quickly. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but that's definitely a goal that we put to ourselves. There are 7 groups there in different stages. Erez, do you want to elaborate a little bit more about the different groups, or who are the actors within the?
Also, because I'm sorry, Erez, I will let you in a second. Just because we're nearing the end of the call, I want to make sure we're not. Josh asked what is relevant to philanthropy, and the part that is relevant for philanthropy is understanding the civil sector actors. So Erez, in your response, can you elaborate on who are the actors also on the ground, and whether they're part of the budget, and how you'll identify these actors as you move forward?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So every group, every local team has at least the next components. First, you will see the mayor or the chief council if it's a smaller town, and his people. And it could be a number of people from his high-ranking staff from the municipality, usually the education manager, the welfare manager, and others. So this is on part of the community and the municipality. You will see the chief of the police of that village or that city. He will be part of the team, he and his people, again, not necessarily only him, it's him and a couple of 2 officers. You will see high-level prosecutor, someone who's from the district attorney that is responsible over that village, like high-ranking manager from that district attorney. You will also see a researcher from the academia, one of the researchers from Badi's Criminology Institute in Jerusalem. So every team has his own researcher that works with him. You will also see a representative of the Rashut Lebichon Kehilati, which I don't really remember how you translated it.
The Ministry of Internal Security.
Yeah, so yeah, and they're responsible about of doing kind of the collaborations between community and police work. So they will have a manager in every village, and there's also the representative Daniela and Zohar that represented the Joint Ashalim, which is also represented in every team. So we're talking about the smaller teams would consist about 10, 12 people as a work group working together.
Thank you. Are there other questions in the room? I want to give the opportunity for real conversation. Okay.
Just one more point. You asked about who are we targeting, and I think I saw in the chat. So the issue of criminal activity in Arab sector is very is the wide picture of the criminal activity, but inside we're focusing on the severe violence, and this project is aimed at reducing severe violence. So there's domestic violence, and there's also youth violence, and there's also drug use and other illegal behaviors. But this program concentrates on the issue of actually really saving people's lives. And this is focused on severe violence and the understanding that this is the most, the sense of urgency about reducing this kind of violence is the highest priority right now.
Great question from Nicole about the level of publicity on the ground related to this this project. How do you have one general theory or approach to how this project is going to be a public campaign, how much it's below the radar? How are you handling that sensitivity in each community?
Yeah, well, it's we need the community, so we also need the community to get the right message. So it can't be under the radar. So, you know, the enforcement approach, of course, will be just for those who deal with the enforcement, but the project will be, the community will know of the project. They will know about the intentions and the motives behind the project. And we hope that also later on, we will get not just legitimacy to the project, but rather collaboration that would help this project to succeed. Because without the involvement of the community, this thing will not work eventually. You cannot win this war with prosecutors and police officers. That will not work. We need the community. And therefore, communication is a very important aspect.
What can we expect about the, you said there's going to be ongoing monitoring and evaluation, as well as the platforms for continued collaboration between the local level and the national level. How, at what point do you think we can start to see such teams working in one of the 7 towns or in all the 7 towns, that we can start to understand really what it looks like and how much effort it takes to get such a team to be a functional and vibrant part of crime prevention? Yeah, same question about Idina, about the timeline of the intervention.
Okay, I will speak, and then maybe Erez, and because we all involved in this. And this is what this is the $1 million question, right? It's like when this thing start to work and actually to produce a change in the reality. So there are some components that they are almost immediate, like this new connection between the prosecutor and the police commander in the field. That happened quite at the first phases, but later on things take time, and also this relationship between the prosecutor and the commander, the police commander, also need to be built, because they are requested to work in different manner that they work in the past. But later on, the other partners join, and they become, we expect them to become an integrative team. In some community that went in more developed manner, we have 2 or 3 communities now that they are really in a good stage, but in other, work need to be done, because our resources are limited, and we try to move as much as we can. And you have to acknowledge that all of those, as Erez was speaking, we don't have here like a hierarchical structure that there is one commander saying to this, you do this, you do that. We don't have this. We almost voluntary, right? Involvement of those agencies. They have their say of every agency from their superior, but it's really a big challenge, and there why we need Daniela and Zohar and other partners, that they try to track and monitor the implementation of the program. This is the huge challenge of this kind. Is that how do you implement and how do you move forward with the program?
For sure, absolutely, and I think we all wish you. I'm not religious, but Godspeed. And look, I know it's 1 o'clock, and a lot of people have to hop on another call. For those that want to stay, and I know I promised you guys only an hour, but I do want to know if you can speak a little bit to the expectations that you have for this project and this coordination to affect the national level, the stakeholders, the partners, the agencies that now will have experience working with local communities on crime prevention. Do you feel like, do you expect that to be some of the impact of this model in changing the approach to Arab societies from the top down? And that'll be my last question before I let you guys go. Daniela, Erez.
Go for it, Daniela.
Yeah.
No, I was about to say, Erez, you should probably take this one, but
Okay, sure. So one of the challenges here is actually making people like the prosecutors and the police chiefs and others do something quite differently from what they have done so far. So this kind of collaboration, I must say, is challenging. And I think that once we present a model that shows results and shows success, then this will obviously can serve as inspiration, and not only an inspiration, but actually kind of evidence for doing more collaborative action in different fields of law enforcement. So today we're handling severe violence in the Arab sector, but maybe tomorrow we're using this for juvenile delinquents in Jaffa, Tel Aviv, right? So I think that if this model is successful, certainly the answer to your question would be positive. I can see how it influences the way that law enforcement interacts with community players and social services providers and community leadership.
I'll add, Leon, a few words. It's also about leadership within those agencies. I think we're lucky to have Erez and Badi and some other partners who are really, really leading this project. This is also key, as you may know, probably in many other programs. I mean, theory is nice and partnerships are good and agencies are all very supportive, but eventually it's also about leadership within those agencies and the fact that the agency itself, the DA or the state attorney in this case, and others and the police are really seeing that as something that is high up, is very important for them, high up on their agenda. And that's something that we should definitely push for also in other ministries. And then, of course, if we show results and the leadership is like that, then, you know, this paradigm can be used in so many other places. But it's a challenge, and it's a challenge across the board, from the lower level in the groups, of course, to the decision makers.
On that note, I want to thank you, and thank you for spending time sharing the model. We hoped that in the pipeline of publications that we produce this year, there will be one on the plans and government actions on prevention of crime and violence. And if so, we hope that in that context, we'll be able to include this model as one that is already underway. And we look forward to hearing updates from you as it progresses. Thank you, Daniela, Erez, Badi, Professor, Advocate, and Doctor. Thank you so much for your time and for your expertise, and
Thank
we
you.
wish you the best of luck.
Thank you for having us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.